Afternoon, everybody. I might make that countdown time a little bit shorter. It seems to go on forever, doesn't it? Even though it's only 30 seconds. So welcome. I'm going to spend 10, 20 minutes just talking a little bit about depth of field. So I thought I'd come on and impart some knowledge or some tips. Some of you may know about it, some of you may not. If you've got any questions, obviously in the comments, let me put the website address up there because I need to do that. I get to put off otherwise. Beyond, which is www.beyondthelensacademy.com. Do this while you let other people catch up. Make sure I type it right. Beyondthelensacademy.com. Okay, so that's a link to the website if you want to know what the academy is all about. Oh, it's popped up in a few places there. So yeah, any questions about photography, anything you want to ask while you're here, pop away, as it were. I'm always more than happy to answer any questions. So if you don't know me, I'll just give a brief introduction and I'll get into talking a little bit about depth of field. I'm Carl Thomas Photography. You can probably see it there. Look. So I run Carl Thomas Photography, surprise, surprise, which is a dog photography business. Been going nearly going on 6 years now, which is brilliant. Love it. Lots of very happy customers, get to meet wonderful dogs and clients on a daily basis. Not so much for the last year, but that's all getting back to normal now, which is great. But a year ago, I set up Beyond the Lens Academy, which is an online training support platform for photographers at any level. And you'll see if you've got a website, all the information's there. We're open for members at the moment and we're closing on Sunday. So if you're thinking about joining, now's a good time. And we have gone a bit nuts and put a 25% discount on top of the discounts that already exist. So now is a good time. That all finishes on Sunday midnight. So we've got a few days yet. But anyway, enough of that. Let's talk a little bit about depth of field, because it's one of those things that is understood by quite a lot of people, but the manipulation of it can be a little bit misunderstood. So, for example, often people say to me, "Oh, I love your images, Carl. So let me just show you a few pickies." Like, what am I known for? So let's little doggy shots. Let's think something like this one. This is quite a famous one. So I love that. It's got a really nice sort of background to it. It's all nice and soft, and the image is standing out. Another one here. Look. It's not just dogs, though. I mean, I do this with. There's another one. Look. Great little shot of that pug a few years back. Yeah, we've got salmon, we've got birds, we all do all sorts in the academy. But the point I was going to make here is that a lot of people think, and it's quite a common misconception, that in order to have that level of background blur and nice shallow depth of field, you need expensive lenses, without a 2.8 or 1.4 or 1.8 or f2. Yes, that helps, but you'd be amazed that you don't necessarily need to have all that. So I'm going to touch on that and how you can manipulate it. But let's first of all talk about what depth of field is, just in case, obviously there'll be lots of people watching this because this has been streamed to the YouTube channel, the Carl Thomas Photography page and the Beyond the Lens Academy page. So there's probably 30,000 followers on there and there'll be a few thousand people watching, hopefully, over time. So depth of field, effectively, the description of it is the amount of the image that is acceptably sharp. That's the most common description you'll see. So if I show you, let me think of a good picture to show you. This one here, probably. Little Wilfred. So as you can see, his sort of nose, just beyond his nose and his eyes. I mean, you might not be able to see that well because if you're watching this on an iPad or a phone, it doesn't show up so well. But broadly, his face is sharp and the background is blurry and everything in front of him is blurry. Here's another example. So lovely orchid and Mr. Bumblebee. Everything behind and everything in front is soft or out of focus. The term is bokeh. That's what they normally call it. But effectively, that's what depth of field is. It's creating that or understanding how much of your image is in focus. So when you focus on a subject, there's a distance prior to that subject. I'm trying to think if I got any grass shots. The best way to see it is if you no, I haven't actually. If you're photographing something where it's got grass or a plain surface below it, because you can see it's all soft, then you get like a sharp bit, and then the background's blurry. And depth of field is that bit in the middle, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, how do you create a shallow depth of field? And the most common response to that, if I talk to people, is, "Oh well, I shoot at a shallow depth of field." Sorry, a small aperture number. Now, this just to make things complicated. Here, show you bits of apertures. I'm sure some of you've seen this before. So, a small number, look, f2.8, f2 is actually a big aperture. A big aperture number, f16, f11, on the bottom row here, is a small aperture, as in the hole that lets the light in through your lens. And so the depth of field, proportionately, as in the amount of your image that's going to be sharp, or in focus, if you like, is going to get bigger as the aperture number gets bigger. If you want a very shallow depth of field, then you have a small aperture. Now that isn't the end of it though, because that's why I want to come on and show you about this. So let me show you a picture, if I can find it, of a little hoverfly I did a while back. I'm always moving my, here we go, there it is. It's fun of them. So that has got probably his wings, his body, and the top of his head in shot. So the depth of field in that image is kind of like millimeters. And so some people sort of think, well, okay, it's just about using the aperture, but there are a couple of other things that you can think about. First of all, the sensor in your camera, the different sizes has an effect on it, but you can't really change that because whatever camera you've got is the camera you've got. But the distance between you and the subject, or the zoom of your lens, the focal length of your lens, have quite an impact. So let me show you what I mean by, if you say you've got a lens that's f5.6, which tends to, f3.5, f5.6. So maybe in your mind, not necessarily the shallowest depth of field you're going to get with those kind of lenses, but this shot at f5.6, and you can see here on the left here, this little camera, there's quite a big depth of field. So you can see, look, it's slightly soft, then it gets sharp in front of the camera, and it's sharp around the camera, and then the background is sharp up to point, but you can still discern or make out the background, the flats or whatever that is in the background. But by keeping the aperture the same, f5.6, because on this particular lens, couldn't shop it down to any lower than that, then all you have to do here is zoom in. So at 70mm, image on the far left, you see the amount of depth of field you got. By zooming in just a little bit, and bear in mind you're talking about just a quarter turn on your zoom lens here to 135mm, you see how the depth of field is started to squeeze in nicely? But then if you zoom into 200mm, you've got a really nice blurred background and a nice blurred foreground, and the camera's nice and sharp. And so what you're seeing there is the impact of zooming in. And the same impact is had when you step forward or step back, because that's the same as zooming in and zooming out, to be frank. So that's a quite an often misunderstood or not quite understood aspect of depth of field. So, for example, when I'm out doing photography, whether it's wildlife, but obviously I'm known for my doggy photography, I will often, so like when I did these oyster catches when we were in Isla, I did this shot, which I think was at 2.8, but then I did a couple of shots, not at 2.8, yeah, 2.8, zoomed in at probably, I think it was about 150 because I managed to get quite close to them. But then I zoomed in a little bit, took a few pictures, and I zoomed out quite a bit, took a few pictures. Because on a lot of cameras now, the sensors are so much better that even if the subject is a little bit smaller in the frame, you can crop it in later when you come into editing, and we talk about all that in the academy. But that little bit of a zooming out can probably take your depth of field from 1 inch to 3 or 4 inches, can have quite an impact. So one of the things that I say, and I often recommend that our academy members do, and that's what I'm sort of sharing with you guys, is just to get used to whatever lenses that you use regularly, your most common lenses, whether it's a 70-200 or a 300mm lens or whatever it is that you use, get used to its depth of field at particular shooting distances. So it's not like you're going to get a calculator out every time you want to do a shot and work it out. But what you need to understand is, and it's a bit like an analogy I gave some of our members when we were doing a webinar the other day about this, is it's like when you first park your car in a garage that you've not parked in before. You go really gingerly, and you might have bleepers, but let's assume you haven't got bleepers, and you haven't hung the tennis ball down like we used to do in the old days. You get closer and closer, and you say, okay, that's about right. And you get out and you think, oh, actually, I've got more distance. And after a while, you get perfectly accustomed to parking your car within 2 inches of the front of the garage inside. Depth feels like that. What you need to do is, in my view, is to get used to. So for example, I use a 70-200 lens all the time for my dog photography. Wildlife's different. But for dog photography, I use a 70-200, and I typically shoot at about 10 feet. And I know at 200mm, I've got about 1.5 inches worth of depth of field there, which if you look at some of these images, there you go. His nose to his eyes are nice and sharp. His nose to his eye, just beyond his nose to his eyes are sharp. It's very sharp. If you look at those, imagine those in sort of real life, it is about that much depth of field. So I know that. I don't need to calculate it. And it's a useful little practice to get into. Now, one of the things that I recommend, and I'm going to try and share it and show it with you, there's lots of apps that you can get now that are free or 50p or whatever, that are depth of field calculators. And all you do is you put you download them obviously onto your Android or onto your smartphone, whatever, or even an iPad, and you tell it what camera you've got. The reason you have to tell it what camera it's got is because you'll have different sensors. So a full frame sensor has a different impact on depth of field with a lens than a crop sensor camera. But you tell it what camera you got, do that once, and then you just put in 3 parameters. You put in the aperture that you're shooting at, the distance that you're shooting the subject at, so how far away it is from you, and the focal length of your lens. So let me see. Let's see if this technology works. So let me see if I can share my screen. Just make sure I'm going to switch on the other one as well so I can see, make sure it's working. Because sharing your phone sometimes can be a bit of a challenge. So let's see what happens. So share screen, find screen. I go here and I'll make that big. So I'm just watching this appear on the other screen. So it looks like it's working. So you should now be looking at my iPhone. I'm just waiting a few seconds just so I can yep, that's working. That's coming up on the other screen. So this is my iPhone. So I'll unlock it. And there's the app. So let me just shut that down a minute. That's what it looks like. See the top right-hand side there, depth of field cap. So that's the one I use, but there are lots of different ones and they're all like 50p or free. So this is what the app is. Now, if forget all this stuff at the top about exposure and EXIF manager, there are all other features. But you go into cameras, as you can see in the bottom right-hand side of this, or bottom left, it says Canon 1DX Mark II. But you click on cameras, you find what camera you've got, you save it. You do that once, unless you've got different cameras. And then you've got a little white bar in the middle at the top there. You can see it says meters, millimeters, feet, and inches. So I quite like this one because it's very straightforward. So depending on what metric you're in. So I've set this at 10 feet, the top there. I'm shooting at f2.8 and I'm shooting at 200 millimeters. So you just vary those. And it gives you a nice little drawing. I'll get on hyperfocal distance in a second if anybody's interested in that. But effectively, what you can see here is, and you don't need to worry too much. What you can tell, though, is that from 9.94 feet to 10.06 feet is the depth field. So let's put that in inches. Oh, I will click on the screen. There we go. Inches. So we got 1.5 inches. Not much. If I change that into millimeters, you've got 4 centimeters of depth of field. So not massive. But what is useful with this app, the two things will happen with it. You'll start to get used to your depth of fields at your different focal lengths. But the other thing is that I can demonstrate with this is 1.5 inches is not a massive amount of depth of field. Say I'm photographing a lab or an eagle or an otter or something that's got a bit more chunkiness to it and you want a bit more depth of field. I can do a couple of different things here. I could, for example, change my aperture to f5.6. And you can see that's doubled my depth of field. Not massively though, it's 3 inches. So let's put that back to 2.8. So you can see how the aperture, which is where most people think it comes from, that has an effect. But let's just imagine I just zoom out to 150 mil instead of 200 mil. Same effect. If I zoom out to 100 mil, I've now got 6 inches of depth of field, which is a bit more like it. And all I've done, if you think about it, is I've moved the lens, on my lens, because it's quite fast, I'm turning it like a quarter turn, well, probably half a turn. And I've now got significantly more depth of field, or significantly more of the image from the point at where I focus it on, is in focus. So let me put that back to 200. So let's imagine we don't want to change the focal length for some reason. The other thing you can do, of course, is you can step back. And I often do this. And I say this to everybody who are, I work with us in the academy or been on our workshops. As a photographer, you've got to be able to be moving around sometimes. Occasionally in wildlife photography, it is the opposite of that. But certainly when I'm doing dog photography, moving around. So literally stepping back, one step for me is about 3 feet. So let's put this back into feet. So let's make that 13 feet. Put that back into inches. That's increased the depth of field as well. Now, if I want to suddenly go the other way, let's put that back in. 120 inches, wasn't it? Yeah. If I want the depth of field to be even shallower, I can't increase my aperture from 2.8 to 1.4 because that lens stops at 2.8. I can't zoom anymore at 200, but I can get closer. So let's put that back into feet. Let's imagine we go to 8 feet. Oh no, let's go to 9 feet, which is like a step, about a meter. That's a step forward for me because I'm quite tall. Drops it down to 1.24 inches. If I then go into feet again and drop it down to say 6 feet, which is getting pretty close actually in fairness, you've got half an inch depth of field. So what you can see from this little app is there are lots of other ways of changing it. So distance between you and the subject, the aperture, and the focal length of your lens, all of which combined give you a lot of opportunities to mess around, if that makes sense. So let me stop sharing that a minute. So I'm back in the room now. Let me check the comments. Any questions? No. Okay. Any questions you want to ask, whether it's about depth of field or the academy or photography or gear or anything like that, just drop it in. I'm always happy to answer. That's partly why I come and do these lines, actually. But you can see from that, hopefully, that depth of field is not it's not fixed. It's not something that is going to be limited by. And I thought this years ago. I thought, if I want a nice shallow depth of field, I need a lens that shoots at 2.8. And yeah, that helps. But all you got to do is get a bit closer if you want a shallow depth of field. And now, if you're shooting macro photography, and I won't share that thing again, but you'll see if you're using say 100mm macro lens and you're a foot from the subject, you've got like a millimeter of depth of field. So let's go back to this image here of our hoverfly. You can see that's like 2 or 3 mils worth of depth of field. Now, sometimes, and we were talking about this yesterday on one of the webinars, it isn't always about having a shallow depth of field. So when I was doing, we were up in Scotland and we were doing the salmon shots. I'm just trying to find the picture. Bear with me. Where is it? Is that it? No. Oh, it's gone. Bear with me. There it is. It's a salmon. So that's lovely intact sharp. Now, what I was doing here was using depth of field, not having a shallow depth of field so that I can isolate the subject. What I did here is I used depth of field to help me get a sharp object or subject by having a wider depth of field. So I think I shot this at about f5.6 and I was a reasonable distance away. And that allowed me a little bit of latitude so that when the salmon jumped, there's a reasonable chance it would be in the zone that I focus on, if that makes sense. So that's another thing to think about. Now, somebody asked me the other day about hyperfocal distance. I hate technical terms. I understand them all, obviously, but I like to keep things simple. But hyperfocal distance, I'm just going to show you a picture, is this little image I saw, so I've sort of share it. So effectively, the hyperfocal distance is the point that you focus on in the image where beyond it, everything's going to be sharp. So it's typically something that landscapes do. So you can see this volcano exploding, and the chat wants this little flower in focus as well. So typically, when you focus your hyperfocal distance, if you remember that app, it will show you, then about half of the distance between you and that subject in front of it will be in focus. So in this case, these little flowers will be in focus, but everything beyond it will be acceptably sharp. So that's a bit of a landscape photography thing, really. And it sounds technical, but it's not. So if you're when you're doing landscape photography and you've got some lovely mountains, or like we're going to be going up doing things like I love showing these photos. If anybody wants to come to Scotland with us, shots like this, and these are the sort of places that we're going to be staying. Well, that's where we're staying. Look, where is it? Oh, can't wait. And we've got space from that if you want to come along. But then what you've got to think about is, okay, I'm focusing on the lock and everything in the background, all the hills, but is there anything in the foreground? So if there's something in the foreground you want to, like it might be a stone wall, or in that particular example, like a flower or some trees or whatever, then it's easy to see. You don't have to measure it. You can just focus on something beyond it and just have a look at the back of the camera and just see at the point where the thing that where you wanted to start from, if you like, the wall, when that's sharp. And then beyond that, pretty much everything should be sharp as long as you're using a decent size aperture. So there we go, 20 minutes. I promised I wouldn't be too long because I'm conscious it's your lunchtime probably. But if anybody's got any questions, let's have a little look. Very quiet today. I'll be doing a few more of these this week because, as I mentioned, the Academy. Let me just tell you a little bit about the Academy before I go. So online training support platform, but it's not just a bunch of recorded information, which is something that a few people asked me about. It's a live, ongoing thing. So what I've just done here now, started talking about depth of field and how it works. If this was a webinar, and I guess this is kind of a webinar, we're doing these 3, 4, 5 times a week in the Academy. They're all recorded while we're doing them. Like this one's been recorded because obviously this is on social media. But they are then uploaded into the Academy. So if you're a member of the Academy, you can, if you miss this one, for example, it would be in the Academy for you to watch later on that evening, along with comments and carrying on. So it's a live, organic kind of Academy. So, there's a direct message facility. So basically what that means is I'm available all of the time if you need to get hold of me. And a lot of our members do. Private Facebook group, lots of activity in there, lots of things going on. I touched on the online learn modules, but they are active live things that are added to every week. So, there's literally hundreds. There's tons and tons of content in the Academy already. So if you join as a member now, you see it's all there and you can start consuming it when it suits you. Sit down with a glass of wine, a cup of tea, and watch something on depth of field or getting sharper images or how to edit in Lightroom or various different modules, lots of stuff. But we're continually adding to it and then we do it live. The reason I do it live and allow members to come along is it just makes it more interesting. For the members that are watching it live, they can come and they normally comment. I mean, everybody here is a bit quiet today, but they normally sort of say, "Oh, Carl, how does that work then?" Or "What's this?" And I think it makes the webinar, when it's uploaded and the recorded version of it's uploaded into the Academy, a bit more interesting. It makes it a bit more real, if that makes sense. I suppose it's been a bland recording of me whittering on. We've got a mobile app. Got to have that these days. We do new gear reviews. We're always talking about things like that. We've got group image critique reviews. That's what that is a concept where we come up with a theme and we do them every 3 or 4 weeks. There's always one in play, if that makes sense, where members can upload a couple of images based on the theme. I put those all together, or the team put them all together in a presentation, and we go and do that as a review live one evening, normally about half an hour or so, an hour, and give critical feedback, and everybody else shares images. Really, really good fun. The other thing we've started doing in terms of our sort of weekly webinars is we've got a thing called a freestyle webinar now, which is brilliant. It's one of my favorites. In fact, got one tonight, 7 o'clock. I try and do them in the evening, although they're not always going to be evenings. Now we're getting better light and things are back to normal. I'll be out and about doing dog photography sometimes, but typically we have been doing them about 7 o'clock in the evening so that more members can come along. And they are, as the name suggests, freestyle. So what that effectively means is I go live, just like this, and I use this platform because this platform allows me to share comments and questions and share images and stuff. And we talk about what everyone talks about. And so for some people, they come along. So certainly some of the pro aspiring pros, they just want to catch up and have a chat about what they'll be doing that week. For a lot of other people, it's just like, just a general sort of catch up. And obviously it's been a challenging year, so that's quite useful. And for the majority of people, they'll ask questions like, "Oh, Carl, yeah, I just want to pop in. I'm thinking about buying this camera. What do you think about that? Or I've got stuck on this setting. How do I change that?" And it's something we started as a bit of a trial, and it's become a fixed part of the process. The other thing we've started to do on a weekly basis, amongst all the webinars, is we do an editing one every week now. I'm an Adobe accredited associate. So you don't have to use Lightroom or Photoshop. Lightroom is my favorite, but some people use Snapseed, some people use Affinity Pro, some people use Photoshop. Once a week, I'll go live and I'll do an edit on whatever subject we've got in front of us. So sometimes the one I did this morning was a dog, very beautiful little thing. Sometimes it's landscape, sometimes it's wildlife, sometimes it's abstract, sometimes it's black and white. But we're doing that every week. So there's lots of stuff going on. Now, in terms of one-to-ones, so a lot of people have asked me about this. Now, if you join the Academy as a full member or a pro aspiring pro, not the associate membership level, you get an introductory one-to-one with me. So we'll schedule a time. There's an online form you fill out that tells me all about why you joined the Academy, what camera you've got, what you want to get from the Academy. And we'll have an hour's chat live like this, just you and me and whichever member it is. And it allows me to make sure, it's nice to meet and greet, which I think is important because we're a live member. It's not a bunch of recorded stuff. But also it allows me to make sure that the ongoing development of webinars and the Academy platform itself take into account all the things that our members are looking to have. So we do that. And then if you join as a full member, there's a monthly one-to-one. So you can come along and say, "Carl, I've done one this month, it's April, can I book a one-to-one?" So get a little slot in the diary. Pretty flexible about when those are, and we'll talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about. That might be, for example, that you've just got a new camera and you want to go through all the settings. It might be that you're a bit stuck on a bit of editing. It might be something to do with your business. And for the pro aspiring pros, they're slightly more regular. They're sort of every other week, so a couple of times a month, sometimes a bit more if necessary. So that's a huge amount of value there. Then the workshops, which I've touched on, we've got the one in Isla in June. We've got one in which is got a space left on it on the second week. There's a couple of spaces left on the one in October. Again, all this information on the website. But the discounted ones, if you remember, apply to the 2-day workshops. So you get 20% off of those. And they're running, there's a date in May, and then there's September and October. So they're getting full already. So there's lots going on in the Academy. And the doors are open. We're normally a closed membership. And again, people have said to me, why do you do that? And the reason for that is we spend our time, and you'll see if you look at any of the reviews, go on the Beyond the Lens Academy Facebook page and have a look at the reviews, see what people are saying about us. And I've put some of those on the website as well. You know, we are obsessive about supporting our members at whatever level you're at. You know, some people have joined if you've got a smartphone, some people have got a really basic camera, some people have got all the gear, if that makes sense. So we kind of cover that. And that's why we don't spend our entire time marketing and sort of outward facing or inward facing, looking after our members. That's why we do it. But right now, the doors are open. They close on Sunday night. So this if you're watching this as a playback, I'm doing this on Wednesday the 28th, and we're closing on Sunday at midnight. And the discounted membership's there anyway. But we've added, if you use the voucher Academy 25, again, you'll see it all on the website. You shouldn't be able to miss it. Put that in, and you'll get further 25% off for 12 months. There's no tie-in. So if you join monthly, you get 25% off on your monthly subscriptions until such time as you want to leave within a year. And then after that, it goes back up to the normal rate. And the same applies to the annual membership, which is significantly discounted anyway. So you get basically 2 months free. That's the way we've done it. But you get another further 25% off that. So it's quite a significant discount at the moment. So if you're thinking about things in terms of photography, you want to learn more about your camera and just have an environment where you get good feedback and it's a great bunch of people and we have a good laugh in the academy, then brilliant. Come and have a little look. If you're a pro or aspiring pro and you're thinking about, you know what, I might want to earn some income from my business. How does that work? I help you with that. And it's a no holds barred kind of level of support. So in addition to all the one-to-ones, I share everything about my business, how I've achieved what I've achieved in terms of the social media presence, the income I've achieved, profit, how it all works. So if that's of interest to you, come have a look. So I'm going to leave you in peace. I always play our little outro video. I'll probably do a couple more of these over the next few days. Well, now Wednesday, before we close on Sunday night, because people normally like to come along and ask a few questions and see what we're up to. Hope that's been useful. Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon. See you later. Bye.
Ooh.